Zoe's extraordinary playlist is an emotional roller coaster where Zoe encounters people singing and dancing to her, sharing their utmost intimate feelings with her. I'm Robert Courier, senior editor at Golden. I'm here with Skylar Astin, who plays Max. Skylar, Zoeys is, as I've said to so many of your cast and crew already, unlike anything else on TV. It proves how vital it is these days to empathise with other people and each other and have a good laugh and a good cry. How much do you love how the show wears its heart on its sleeve?
Well, I love that the show is born out of almost a coping mechanism for our show's creator, Austin Winsberg, whose father tragically died from PSP, which is the disease that Peter Gallagher, who plays Mitch on our show, has. And so I think that it's really lovely that it comes from a real place. And then beyond that, it really talks about loss and empathy. And then again, like, there's a romantic comedy element to it. There's an ensemble comedy element to it. And while it feels like a bunch of genres kind of assembling, there's a real cohesive through line, and people have really like taken to the tone of our show and the fact that we can make you laugh and cry minutes apart. So I just like being a part of all of those stories, and it's really great that we've had 12 episodes, but really every character has their own point of view within the story.
Yeah, and what I'm really happy about is that you've just very recently been picked up for a second season. There was a lot of umming and ahhing about this, obviously, because we were in the middle of a pandemic and all the upheaval, but the network has come through, so congratulations on that. That must be very exciting.
Thank you. Yeah, we're really excited. We were really hopeful, and we heard it was likely, but I think, you know, when you get that official good news, it's really exciting. And now we need to just figure out what that all means and when it all happens, and, you know, how the pandemic is going to affect it. But there are some really, really great ideas that Austin has talked to us about, and I think the writer's room starts on Monday, so it's very exciting.
Oh, wow, that's fantastic. So you can't really share anything yet about what we can look forward to? It's too early?
I think it's probably too early to mention it, but I have my own wants and desires for Max, and that is just born out of like the integrity that he's built throughout the second half of season one, within his own story, within, you know, as it pertains to Zoe and his relationship, but also just, you know, him being on his own journey and his own career and what that means for him. He was slightly ambitionless in the first half of the season, and that was like a part of his character. But as it's evolved and as the story's gone on, we've really gotten to see like who Max is and really like trying to find out who Max is. And I think season 2 is going to really explore that more.
Oh, that's perfect, because, yeah, as you say, he did become more assertive as the season progressed, and started to learn more about him, which is great. It's what happens in all shows. You've got such a large cast that obviously there had to be a bit of patience before you were able to kind of really dig in and do a bit of a deep dive about him. So when you received the scripts throughout the season, was there any moment in particular where you thought, okay, this is what I've been waiting for, I'm really happy that we get to do this with him now?
Yeah, there was one moment in episode 10, actually, and, you know, Austin and all of our writers do such an expert job, but there was one moment actually in episode 10 where at the read-through, it was a fight between Jane and I, and we, I guess, didn't get like hot enough at each other, and Austin was kind of wondering why that was, and sometimes it takes not only outside eyes, but someone who's in the psychology of the actual person to say, hey, I think I have a fix, or I think I know why. Max was being typically understanding of Zoe, and I was like, I'm over it. I'm sick of standing by her desk and being understanding. Like, he's done. It's about time. And by the way, she's calling him some names and making some judgments about him that are really unfair. And if I'm in the body and the mind of Max, I'm offended. And actually, I'm not okay with that. So I like the fact that, you know, we, while preserving their relationship, really gave them two opposing truths, and that makes for the best conflict. And I think that by the time just a couple quick writing adjustments, and then Jane and I just having the right point of view, contrasting each other, it made for a really great scene. And I think it was one of my favorite scenes of the episode, even of the season, even though it wasn't happy and a fun romantic musical storyline. It was like, oh damn, like they fight hard. Which I think is, I think you do that with the people you care about.
Of course. You always end up kind of hurting or lashing out at the people that you love the most, right? That's real. That's real. And even though the show is heightened and it's there's fantasy elements, it actually is quite real and authentic in the way people relate with each other. Like Lauren Graham's character is not the bitchy boss, and Jane isn't one-dimensional, and Max is, yes, he started off being, we didn't know much about him, but he became quite assertive and very integral to the central plot line. It brings me to this. So what I love when I hear from performers is when they really own their character and they care about them and they defend them. And it seems like you're really doing that with Max. Like, you obviously have to inhabit him, but you take him to heart, don't you?
I really do. I really care about him so much. And it's interesting when you're in the shoot, you know, and you're like knee deep in episode 7 of 10 or 10 of 12, and you start to kind of fight back. And I reserve those kinds of battles for, you know, they say pick your battles. And there have been very few times where I've kind of fought back because I do care. And like, I've had independent conversations with cast members like John Clarence Stewart, who plays Simon, and we always made sure, even before we went into production on the series, to like make sure that it never feels competitive in a way that Zoey feels like anybody's prize, because that really takes away from both of our characters, and more importantly, Zoey's character. She's nothing to be won. She's her own independent force. So like, we always wanted to maintain a level of respect. Like, you know, and that happens in life. You know, you can be in love with someone or want to be with someone and they don't feel the same way, or they feel a certain way about someone else. And I think it takes a real man and a real person to understand that and acknowledge that. And, you know, while there could be competition amongst the fans, like, I don't think that Max and Simon see it as competition. I think they're just in their own psyche and in their own mindset. And Zoey is a huge part of both of their hearts.
Yeah, I mean, like, you've touched on this now, but the Team Max, Team Simon thing is what we would see on any show. It's kind of a fun, almost juvenile thing that people love to do, and it drums up support for the show, and I get where it's coming from. But I just wonder sometimes when you're playing one of the people on the teams on any show, isn't it interesting for you to try to put yourself in Simon's shoes? And what do you think, why do you think people might want to be on Team Simon? Because for me, it doesn't make a lot of sense. To me, it's all about Team Max, but that's because we're coming from our own lens. What would you say to people who don't see it that way?
Yeah, well, I think that what Simon has shown, at least in season 1, that maybe Max hasn't, is a little bit more vulnerability and a little bit deeper of a connection, that they're almost kindred spirits. And I think that there's really something beautiful about that. While Max is like her friend through and through and knows her better than some other people ever would, or has his own relationship to the family that pre-exists, the story that we're telling here, that is deep in its own right. But like, Simon has this a struggle. And like, I think that sometimes, and I don't want to say forbidden fruit, but you know, when we do meet Simon, he is engaged, and like, for people who have been caught up in those kinds of situations, it's tricky and it's messy, and sometimes that can really strengthen a bond. So I understand why people would be drawn to that storyline. And you know, I don't really know where I stand. I mean, I've been a part of a couple teams before, and interesting how people really like, they like dislike you, you know, even as a person on the internet. You're like, dude, it's not Olympics. But hey, look, I love the excitement. I really do. I welcome it. John and I never take it personally, especially this story. Like, you know, maybe in the other movies or things I've been a part of, it could feel a little like random. But I mean, I just feel like this is clear. I mean, we set those rules and parameters within our own narrative. I mean, I think Mo says episode 3 or 2, like, my Team Simon or Team Max, so we definitely like lit the kindling to that fire for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, it's better than no one caring at all. So, so it's a good attitude to have. I want to just talk more specifically about some of your highlights, particularly because this is a musical, and most people who know you know that you have a background in, you know, singing and dancing, and so it's not like as if this is completely foreign to you. But it's still I would still say that there's still some vulnerability as a performer when you have to do something like, for example, to me, your best number was Sucker. I thought it was spot on. Firstly, objectively, it was so beautifully directed and edited, and those great tracking shots when you're dancing throughout the office, I thought was brilliant. What were your thoughts on that number? Because yeah, I think that was the moment where I really started to appreciate Max more.
I love Sucker for many reasons. One, because in the pilot, you know, just to be literal about it, he's saying, "I think I love you," and in Sucker, there's no question. He is all on her, and I loved playing with that intention. And then from a technical standpoint, I love when our show. I always say this is like the Passover question of why is our show different from other shows? Even why is our musical different from other musicals? And there's like this cerebral element of magic that you've even mentioned that the way we shoot that is we try to feel like we're in the room with Zoe. So that means sometimes no cuts. And Sucker is pretty much a oneer. I mean, we definitely shot it as a one take shot, but I think we owed a couple coverages, a couple reaction shots of Zoe, just super close up so we could tell that story. But really, I think there's one or two minor cutaways, but mostly it's just one big tracking shot, head to toe. And that really not only showcases Mandy Moore's choreography, but the design of just like the action, just the moment. And I think that's probably why you and myself are such big fans of Sucker. It was just a very clear story, and we just really got to feel like they're like that's how it would happen. Like if Zoe just heard music, it would just go off of her reaction and back to one. Yeah. I mean, I think Bailamos is another one where it starts on, and Zoe and I just taking a look at Mo and Eddie, and like the whole song happens and it goes right back to us. I mean, no cuts. Also, American Pie, 7 minutes, no cut.
Like that, talk about a oneer. Like that very rarely happens on network TV, and I'm hoping whoever it is that votes on awards and all that kind of things is going to take notice of this show for that aspect, if not anything else, because it's the best directed show, comedy, I think, on TV because of things like that.
Yeah, and it really, there's a real vision for everything. There's a real reason. I mean, there's a song, and when we do Pressure in episode 8, that we had more cover. We covered that like a big movie. I mean, that had 40 setups. We had to tell that when we were showing all different realities and going back and forth from one another, like that is a totally different thing than something like Sucker. And I just love how everything has an intention. Everything has a reason.
Yeah. Another one that I really liked was If I Can't Have You, which is the one in the food court. That one's different. It's sincere. It's relatable. It's kind of corny, but it's Max at his most endearing and vulnerable. What's it like to be able to go there and do that kind of work?
That one was interesting because Richie Keene, our director for that episode, and Austin Winsberg, our creator, and Mandy, we all had the conversation of this is Max singing in reality versus zoality, which is an internal word we use as Zoe's reality. So that means that in zoality, Max has this soaring voice who could sing big high notes, but like in real life, Max Richmond singing in a food court, this is really happening for real. So it's like threading the needle of sounding good still because A, it's a musical TV show. B, we have to convince Zoe that it's one of her typical songs she hears. And then like also showing that like, what are we going to show that Max is as good of a singer as Skylar? That's just a little like phony. So that resulted in one of my biggest fears, which is being mediocre. So that like, we're not saying you should be, I can't write one song but also we don't want to do your big embellishments that sometimes you do in songs like Sucker, where you alt melodies and show off a huge falsetto. So it was like, if you could just give kind of a B minus vocal performance, I'm like, that freaks me out because I'm so worried that it won't read. But we really found once we got to the food court, and you know, I'm not giving us even more credit than we deserve, but I'm telling you, we shoot this show with 8 days each episode, 6, sometimes 5 or 6 musical numbers, and all the scenes that take place. It's crazy. There's literally no time to rehearse. So I went to that food court the night before at like 9 p.m. after I wrapped for 10, 15 minutes. Mandy plugged me in. But then between that rehearsal and then being there on the day, we really found this joy in that number, and I could not stop smiling and just singing through that smile with the pre-recorded, slightly not as good sounding vocal. It just hit this really sweet spot, and it became a very endearing moment for the show and for Max.
Yeah, you can totally tell that. See, it comes off the screen because it is endearing, and the dancing's really corny, but it's intentionally that way, and we're really in that moment with him. Like that's us empathizing with you and your character, and so that's a little meta for me, which I love. It's great. That's perfect. Um, you've raised Mandy a few times. I had the pleasure of speaking to her a couple of weeks ago. She's like an incredibly talented choreographer. She is a beast of a choreographer, and to have her on this show is a real gift. I imagine she really pushes you guys to get the best out of you. What's the highlight of working with Mandy Moore?
I think her kindness is her highlight, and that's her biggest attribute. I mean, she commands a certain level of performance because of who she already is. And thankfully, there's been a cast assembled where we all want to bring our A game. So thankfully, she's never had to assert herself and say, "Look, you're going to try your hardest, or I'm not going to let you do this." That was never the case with Mandy or Jillian Myers or Jeffrey Mortensen, who are her associates, who we all call, the three of them together, Team Dance. And every time Team Dance walks on set, it is this, again, that Passover question of how is our show different from other shows? It's moments like this. And it always comes at this incredibly welcomed, slightly stressful time where we're just bogged down with teamwork. We're doing all the big group scenes in Spark Point, which has a ton of actors in it. So sometimes it's long and difficult and arduous to cover that. And here we go. It's time for Skylar to come in with an opera, balletic, Conte Partido like thing. And there's this like, there's this excitement when we like are about to show the crew, because, you know, every time before you do any scene, you rehearse it quietly and then you show the crew so they can put down marks and light it. But this is kind of a different attention. And everyone is like excited, but also equally focused. And, you know, so they're taking joy, but now you watch like our camera operators and our assistant camera crew and just all of the grips, they start to watch like, okay, so where do I fit into this? And that to me is like the most harmonious part of working with this cast and crew, because they all like want to pick up the pieces. And in a moment, in a sequence like something like American Pie, it took every single crew and cast member to make that happen, to show passage of time, to show lighting changes and adjustments, where Mandy needs to make her adjustments, where Austin needs to make his story adjustments, where the literal prop department needs to say, you got to clear that kitchen table out quicker because we saw it. I mean, people hiding under stairwells, like it was like NASCAR. I mean, it was really like everybody knew their why, their intention, and it's like moments like that that I live for. So yes, to answer your question, Team Dance is like the most thrilling and challenging, but always exciting part of what we do there at Zoeys.
Yeah, it's when you speak of American Pie, it brings me back to I've probably watched it a couple of times because I had to go through it again to watch all the bits that I missed because I was in the moment. And being in the moment was because it was so sad to see Mitch go, and it reminds me of the outpouring on social media, the grief that people felt for him. And you know, what were your thoughts on that day when you were effectively saying goodbye to Peter Gallagher and his character?
Well, the goodbye, you know, I spoiler alert, I knew we were saying goodbye to Mitch pretty much from the start of shooting the series. We knew that he was going to go. I mean, it was always subject to change, of course, but we had an idea, just based on Austin's real story, that it was a matter of time before we said goodbye to Peter. But it's a little bit of a dangerous story because it involves me reading a script in my bathtub on a laptop. So I digress. I don't support that. I don't encourage that, but I did. And I wept so hard because when I tell you the like director's note that Austin wrote before American Pie, just how this is really a piece on life and acceptance and moving on, and like how ethereal it was already. I felt how it was already going to be shot. He didn't, you know, just from the assignations of who sings what. And then just like, I was just weeping. I was weeping so much that, you know, when you do that thing where you're like, I can't believe I'm crying, you almost like want to film yourself or something. I literally like pulled out my phone, another electronic, and put the laptop away. So just keeping it to one electronic per bathtub. And one of those voice notes, you know, for Austin, just because I was just like, I just felt so emotional, but so proud to be a part of something that was saying something and honoring this man and honoring this rare disease. And I just felt like we did it, and it was ours to really make or break. And, you know, that pressure is like something that our show is always up to the challenge. But on the day, first of all, there was a fire drill. So it kind of broke the ice. It was like, okay, well, we're already behind. Yeah. So just go for it. And I got to be honest, it's about a 7-minute sequence that felt like 2 minutes each time there was a take. Couple false starts for very little technical things that we didn't want to, like, you know, blow the ending for Jane and everyone involved. And I think take 3 or 4 was like the first time we got through it. And then we did 2 more as insurance. And I think that second to last take is the one we used. And we all even had time to gather in the kitchen after we all watched playback and just talked about like how I get emotional talking about it because, you know, we always knew it was important. And, but when we also knew that like we were going to reach people through something very like artful, I just feel like that is something really rare. And I don't know that I've ever been a part of that in television. And I remember watching True Detective randomly, first season, episode 4, and there was just this huge tracking shot where it was an aerial shot of this big drug raid, and I was like, oh my God, I'm sure people are hiding behind those beams and they got their things and they're ready to go, and like how exciting. I just watched that docuseries Cheer on Netflix where it's like everyone in there to hit theirs. I know what it's like to be a part of a musical where we're totally not ready to be in front of an audience, but we had the deadline and we're here. And it was so one of those days, and just like the feeling of accomplishment, satisfaction, and the brilliance of having it being shot on the last day was something that just became so sentimental. I'll never forget it.
That's amazing. That's a great story. Skylar, I want to really thank you for your time today. Congrats on season 1. Congrats on season 2. And hopefully if we can send out some positive vibes to the Disney gods, because you do need to be on the next live action Hercules if possible.
I will find my way. I can go the distance. I would love to. A big dream role for me for sure.
Positive vibes. Thanks again for your time.
Thank you.
Now, all playlist fans, go to goldderby.com, make your predictions, click subscribe, and watch all of our great contender chats, just like this one.